tent and start coffee for everyone. And I am afraid I gave you quite the little start there, Tom, when you came around the corner that morning and saw me, but I did earn the dubious distinction of being the first to beat Tom to the tent. And it was around that kitchen tent that we gathered as our small group most afternoons. And that's when you really got to see Tom's passion for the Arctic Refuge. Countless times, the discussion began with Tom asking us, what are we going to do to save this place? Tom's drive and energy really pushed us to think of big ideas. His decades of work around protecting the Arctic Refuge has always aimed for those big ideas. And I'm thrilled we're able to bring the latest one to you all tonight. It doesn't get much larger than an IMAX film. And so with that, I'm thrilled to turn it over to Mr. Tom Campion to kick off tonight's program.
Thank you, Monica. I'm here in Seattle, Tom Campion, and I'm here to introduce my good friend Florian Schulz tonight. But before I do that, and he's going to talk a little bit about this project, I want to spend about 5 minutes here. A lot of you here are Arctic warriors. You've been in this fight a long, long time. But for those of you that are not in this chaotic country of ours in the last 4 or 5 years, let me just tell you how long the Arctic fight has gone on. So very briefly here, the Arctic region was brought to our nation's attention by Olaus and Marty Murray in 1930s, almost 100 years ago. In 1960, Dwight Eisenhower made it a game range. In 1980, Jimmy Carter passed one of the most incredible land protection acts in the history of the world, called the Alaska Lands Act, 1980. And it got passed after Reagan beat him. It wasn't signed till early '81. And it expanded the Arctic game range, made it a refuge to 20 million acres, about half the size of the state of Washington. So you can envision 20 million acres with nothing in it but nature. You get a feel for this incredible place. But it left out 1.5 million acres on the coastal plain, an area, an environment, an ecosystem alive with polar bears, grizzly bears, hundreds of bird species, wolverines, the birthing ground for the porcupine caribou herd, which is the longest mammal land migration on the face of the earth. And it also has an unknown amount of oil under the ground. And of course, this is America, and we're known for oil and public land and mix. And where the refuge now has been in our nation's consciousness for over 50 years, or actually close to 90 years, is 1.5 million acres of political fight that has gone on for over a half a century. So if you work on the Arctic, you gotta love the fight. AWL, we're like babies in this fight, and yet we've been around for a quarter century. We're based in DC, and great friends, and I hope when all this is over, you'll support them for the continuing of our work. We're based in DC, where public land fights are won or lost. It is always in Congress. And Alaska, with a third of our nation's public lands and half our shorelines, and half the nation's shorelines, and the Arctic Refuge being the longest land fight in our nation's history. George Bush came in 01. His idea, the core of his energy plan, was drilling the Arctic Refuge. And the League, under the leadership of Adam Colton, who was our legislative director early on for the first vote, the League led the American conservation movement. We beat back votes to drill for oil in the Senate 3 times. The first time, 52 to 48. The second time, 51 to 49. And the third time, when filibusters still meant something, it was my good friend, my own senator here out of Seattle in the state of Washington, Maria Cantwell, who had camped on the refuge with me, understood how wild it was. We saw grizzlies and wolverines and caribou. She loved the place and has been an Arctic warrior ever since. We got 42 votes that night to filibuster a defense appropriation bill, and the Arctic was saved one more time. So in the last 20 years, it's this epic political fight. Do we drill or do we protect this precious place? Trump He's got a different tactic. He put the Arctic wilderness in his tax bill, and then he inflated the return he promised the American people. What would we receive from drilling? Politics is never what is true. It is what is perceived to be true. And that's a little about what this film's going to be about. Alaska Wilderness League has fought this fight ever since. Currently, we all need to understand we're in court to prevent a potential sale before the end of the Trump presidency. Biden beats him, that sale might come as early as maybe in a month or two in December. So after 9 years of doing this, fighting for this place, we're coming to, at some level, a sense of urgency here and a fork in the road. So what does all this have to do with my friend Florian Schulz? I've known him for 15 years. He was working on a Yellowstone project. I was introduced to him by a newspaper reporter friend of mine, Joe Conley, that was working for the Seattle PI for decades. And Florian and I have collaborated on many Arctic books, bringing beautiful images of America's Arctic to the American people. But we both knew, both Florian and I were pretty adamant and pretty passionate, pretty aggressive about this place. We needed to do more. So the idea of a film of the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge was created. I'll let Florian, who is the heart of this project, go into more detail, but not till you see, first time ever, I think, kind of seen by the public. We got a 2-minute clip of the film project, a film that if you ever decided to do an IMAX film or any film and decided to release it at the start of a pandemic, go find something else to do. At age 72, it's like all the theaters in the world close, but it doesn't mean we're not going to get there probably by next year. So Florian, he's a friend. He's a very skilled artist. He's a naturalist. And, you know, that's all great. And I love all that. But I've gone up to the Arctic several dozen times now in the last quarter century. And what I respect most about Florian Schulz, he's a real tough outdoorsman, that he worked on the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge in every season to shoot scenes for this film. A little bit you're going to see. He's from Germany. Why he did this, his wife and his 2 kids, 2 sons were born. He'll probably tell you a little bit about that. I respect the artist, the naturalist, the passion for protecting wild landscapes, but I really respect the tough outdoor guy that he is. He's a really skilled outdoorsman. So the 2-minute trailer you're about to see, 90 years we fought for this wild place, and it's been in our nation's consciousness. Let's hope that this film moves it a little bit forward, out of the courts, keeps it in the nation's consciousness. And I got to tell you, as I always say at the end of this, I really believe this fight's just getting started. So Monica, cue the film, bring up the curtain, get rid of me here.
In the far north is a magical place that few have ever seen. Join National Geographic photographer Florian Schulz on a journey into a true wilderness.
What draws me here is one of the most beautiful wild places left on our planet.
This is a sanctuary of incredible diversity. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Experience this adventure. Discover how each of us is connected to this special place. Come with us to this natural wonder worth protecting. The Arctic, our last great wilderness. Coming soon.
And with that, I would like to introduce Florian Schulz.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. Very moved by your words, Tom, and so proud to be part of this group. I don't know what to say. I for sure know one thing is that without Tom's friendship and this collaboration and Helen and some of the other people here in this room, this film would have never happened. I would have never had the chance to be out in this wilderness and hopefully now with the images be able to share it in the future. I'm so glad that Tom was able to do this introduction because it really shows the urgency, the importance of what needs to happen here and the critical time we're at. What I want to do first is basically take you with me on the journey into the Arctic Refuge and share a little bit about the background of making this film, about my experiences in the wild. But later on, we also will hear from Bernadette, directly from a Gwich'in, who talks about her ancestral lands, which I was very blessed to be able to still see in a state that are wild, that they have been for tens of thousands of years. But with that, let me jump into the presentation. You'll go between my images and myself telling stories and just give you a true impression about this wild place. The Arctic Refuge for me has been like a place that I could time travel to. But before all of this happened, it really started with a childhood dream. I grew up in southern Germany, and before I could actually head into this wilderness, I had to figure out a way to come to North America. At that time, I was already very passionate about photography. I started at the age of 14. And as you see me here, I'm staring up into the sky, waiting for a cloud to move in front of the sun so that I could photograph the orchids in this field here in southern Germany. But for me, I was dreaming about wild places in North America. I was spurred on by the books of Jack London and that imagination of this place of North America where wolves and grizzly bears still roam. That is really what got me so excited about wilderness, because in Germany, we have lost wilderness. We don't have wide open spaces that are still here. But at the rate we are going, even here in North America, we are losing them ever faster. So for me, it was my decision I would head to Alaska. And over 20 years ago, it was the first time that I picked up the car on a road trip. But before that, I traveled to Mexico. I wanted to learn to speak Spanish, but also to dive and learn underwater photography. It was, yeah, a dream, but at the same time, I had a luck down there in Mexico to meet my future wife. At the time, I had to just not tell her about my passion on the far north, on the Arctic, because yeah, there in the hammock where we met on the beach in Mexico, she probably didn't have the Arctic in mind that we would visit later on. That's Emil. As you see her traveling across Greenland with me, we were camping in a tent at -30, -40 degrees Celsius. And she made it through there. So that is our joint past, that where and how we got into the wild. But from there, it really drew me back to Alaska, to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, a place that is, yeah, almost a little bit mystical because it's so hard to get to. And many people hear about the stories about the refuge, but very few people get a chance to actually go there. And so for me, it was really important to now create a visual account of the Arctic Refuge so people at least could travel there in their own imagination. Most people hear about the Arctic Refuge as this frozen wasteland, as you see in this image. They think, that it might just be a flat white nothingness, as some politicians have called it in the past. And for me, it was now my job to head out into that flat white nothingness and come back with imagery. Now, if I'm honest, it was a little bit scary thinking about that. How to even go about being out in the wild for sometimes weeks or even months at a time. How would I keep the cameras running? How would I prevent the cameras from failing in these temperatures? But I love that challenge, and I often draw similarities and say, this white nothingness for me was a canvas to draw upon and bring color and life to it with my images, with my photography, with my filmmaking. And that's what I set out to do. So in 2014, it was when we really teamed up with Tom and the Campion Foundation and decided we are going to go for it. We're going to start documenting, making a major film production. And my brother Salomon was at the side, and we traveled to the Arctic Refuge again and again. But in between now, I want to let you first just take in the wonder of the Arctic Refuge. For me, it was really exciting to be out there even in the winter time. Why? Because it's a quieter time. It's a time when much of nature sleeps. It's a time when the northern lights are out. But there's animals like the musk oxen that even called Arctic Refuge their home in the dead of winter. Temperatures plummet to sometimes even -50 or 60. I was lucky that in my time that I was filming the musk oxen, it was -30 to -40 that the temperatures were at. But when you're out in these kinds of temperatures, as well as with the animals on the ground, you're able to capture imagery that is different. Imagery that lets you understand what the animals and their habitat are all about. So together with my brother, I spent several weeks documenting the musk oxen in the refuge. The musk oxen, for me, are an ancient creature, and they have that expression of something ancient. I love it, especially when the temperatures are low and a storm comes up, because then you really show the elements. In my photography, I'm really trying to get across the sense of place. And I think here in this image that you see right now, you understand that these musk oxen are battling in a severe winter storm, in a real blizzard. But now, of course, while, in a still photograph, it's possible to capture a moment and freeze it for eternity. I now had the challenge of actually creating images that would also be very powerful in moving images. In this image, it's that moment of these two muskox bulls coming together. But when I'm photographing, I'm staying really, really focused. And what was really special in this moment is that these muskox came together, and three of them got together in a perfect formation, and this image came to life. Three of the muskox bulls, just as they were heading towards the setting sun. Now, like I said, I was in a project to create a film. And so now I needed to figure out, how do I do this in the film world? How do I translate an image like that that's frozen into a stunning moving image? And that was our next challenge. And the only way we could do is actually really being out there, spending enough time. The beautiful thing was that the muskoxen are relatively stationary, And we were right amongst them for several weeks. Multiple bulls were in the vicinity, and they were always challenging the dominant bull. And here you can see what's going on. The bull's eye, the male that has the harem, and they're constantly coming in. I was so excited after getting this sequence, and I had already been away from home for several weeks on this specific expedition. After I documented these musk oxen going into this incredible fight, I go back to the tent and I have to download everything, but I don't want to give up in this moment because I know, okay, I'm already away from the family. I spend all this time out in the wilderness and I want to really make use of every moment to be out in the wild. So here I'm quickly making sure that all the images are in good shape, that I have enough backups, and we go out again. We want to use especially the good days because in between we have day after day of storms or ways where we couldn't actually properly film. But on that morning, when the sun came out, something unique happened. As I was filming the musk oxen, I realized that one of the females was behaving a little bit differently. As I took a closer look through my viewfinder, I noticed that she was moving in an awkward way and that something was going on. She was a little bit to the side of the herd, and the closer I looked, I started to realize that actually during the cold of winter, she was actually giving birth to a young muskox calf. Something like this, I don't think had been filmed before. And so for me, it was just something so unique and exciting. I couldn't believe my eyes because it was so surprising. I would have never expected this calf to be born so early in the year when the temperatures were still low like this. But here it was, suddenly this tiny little calf. And it was hard for the calf to get up on its feet in the first moment, but the mother turned around. They touched noses in this way. And for me, it was just pure joy to see that. I was shaking with excitement, and especially when I then saw this tiny little creature rise to its feet and follow its heart. After this moment, I was really excited to share that with Emil. I was in my tent, again, downloading the footage, and I quickly jumped on the phone. I still remember, I was just completely overflowing with excitement, sitting there in that tent, on the sat phone. And when I did the call and Emil answered, I still remember I was bubbling over, but Emil said, "Florian, finally I hear from you. What's been going on? You're away in the wilderness for days and I hear nothing I hear from you." And that, with her fiery Latino ways, she was just furious. that anyway, so she was like, I'm pregnant at home. Yeah, I guess I forgot to tell you that before, but she was pregnant at home. Like, I'm pregnant at home, and we're getting close to the due date, and you don't even call. And I'm like stuttering, but I want to tell you something really exciting as well. We just and I wanted to get the words in, but she's like, by the way, I had the first contractions. And then I just had to, get it in there. And she said, like, well, but the muskoxen are giving birth too. And that's so exciting to film. So anyway, at that moment, Emile kind of calmed down. And as I was telling her the story, what I had just watched, she was, amazed by this beautiful encounter. And so while she did have her first contractions, I quickly got out of there. Actually, it still took several days. By the time I was out of the refuge, get picked up with a bush plane and all of that. But I made it home. And the irony was that after I was back home in Germany, nothing happened. She didn't give birth for another month. And I guess the baby was all relaxed. She was all relaxed. And so anyway, it was good to be at home, but it didn't take long that I headed back out into the wild. Sylvan was born. That's a few years back now. And for me, it was really an urgent time. Why was it so important for me to head back out? The reason is that the Arctic Refuge is really under threat. And if you look at this next image that I'm showing you, in that top corner as we're zooming in, you actually see one area of light. And that area on the northern coast of Alaska is Prudhoe Bay, the Prudhoe Bay oil field. And to the east of it is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And you still have darkness, a true wilderness. But now the pressure of development is encroaching onto this last great wilderness. At the moment already, we have a stretch of over 60 miles of pipelines, of oil roads, of power plants, and a mix of development like you see in this image. And for me, the thought of allowing such development go over into other areas, pushing the animals further and further to the side, just makes me completely sad. Because we already have allowed development in such a huge area, and the place like the Arctic Refuge is so unique and special. It is a place where the coastal plain, the vast expanse of these plains and the Arctic Ocean come very close to the mountains. The Saddle Rochard Mountains and the Brooks Range are right there, and nestled in between is this coastal plain that is the refuge for the caribou that come there every year. The porcupine caribou really depend on them, a herd that has over 200,000 animals. And so it's really, really important that we don't allow this kind of destructive development. The polar bears you see here in this image are just at the border of the refuge, and in the background you see the encroaching development. And so I just really, really hope that we can figure out a way to turn this around, to share with the American public what a special place the Arctic Refuge is, so that we don't turn it into what you see in Prudhoe Bay. It's actually very chilling for me, the idea of losing this last great wilderness. And especially in a time when we already know that production of more oil is something detrimental to the planet. We know that's the wrong form of energy. To still go down that route and at the same time destroying so much habitat is just mind-boggling to me. And just like Tom said, false numbers were projected of how much the American public would receive from the lease sales. It would not be a gain, especially the use of this oil would not provide energy for a long time. It would be simply a few months of the energy needs of the United States. The only chance of energy independence would really be coming up with other alternative sources, not using up the same amount of energy, being more conservative of the use and finding alternative ways. So now I really hope that people, really understand this. For me, it is a way of getting more people involved, getting them engaged, working as a journalist, like in this story, The Refuge at Risk for National Geographic, or giving talks like here in Seattle and Benaroya Hall. But we all need to work together to get the message out there, because the Arctic Refuge is one of those last great wild places. Why did I come from Europe? Because we have lost wild places. And I just really hope that Americans understand that they are at the brink of losing all these great wild places too, if we don't rethink it. Right now, it's still there and it's so precious. And yeah, that's why I keep working on getting this information across. And this is what brings me to this film, the film on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Year after year, I returned to the refuge to film there. I had to learn a lot about where the animals are, at what time of the year. And it was specifically important for me to document the caribou migration. Over 200,000 animals strong, the porcupine herd. But I have to be honest, when you're going and traveling to the Arctic Refuge, it's not a guarantee that you will see the porcupine caribou herd, that you will see any large number of animals at all. The first years, I miserably failed. I didn't see big numbers of caribou. I would see one individual here, a handful there, and that's part of it. But the animals still need that vast expanse of the land. They still need the grazing areas. They need these extensive plains in order to survive, and especially the young caribou calves. It took, again, year after year, and scanning and searching for the caribou. And I still remember the one time where we already saw the trails like this coming across, and my wife actually was part of this trip, and she was screaming and said, like, Florian, I'm sure the caribou are coming, the caribou are coming. But then, like it is so often, there was just one single caribou. All the herd had already passed. It was tracks, and it happens often in a flash. They can stream by in the thousands, you know, for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, but then they vanish almost like ghosts across the tundra. And so for me, I get then surprised with other things in nature that the Arctic Refuge has to offer, and that's the thousands of mosquitoes, other type of abundant life in the Arctic Refuge. And here we have me trying to photograph, during the summer months. But I have to say, it's not all that terrible, and one actually gets used to even the mosquitoes. It's a little bit hard holding still, but you can't shake that camera. So finding the caribou, like I said, was one of the big things. And here I turn into a rock. I'm up in the mountains around Mount Chamberlain here, and a band of caribou is coming by. Sometimes the caribou, I didn't even need a blind, and they would just walk straight up to me. As long as I sat completely still, if I wouldn't move, here they would come. They're actually very inquisitive and curious animals. And so the funny thing is, sometimes I was trying so hard to get close and it wouldn't work out. And in the next moment, there's the caribou right in front of you, like you see in this image. We had to make real good plans. We had to figure out, do the logistics, and understand the routes of the caribou. I was fortunate to work with some of the greatest bush pilots out there. And again, learning with every other year that I would spend. In total, it was it was actually several entire years now that I've spent in the Arctic Refuge in order to get the images that you see in the film. Now, the caribou, they're just really specially adapted to their migration and also to this terrain. They can move like no other animal can across this landscape. The caribou, they're probably one of the most efficient walkers of any animal in the wildlife kingdom. And when you try to keep up with on foot, you can't do that very long, especially hauling all this equipment around. So I was really happy to, in between, be able to get dropped off in the right spots with the bush plane, like you saw in the previous image. But a lot of times it just meant taking the time, giving it enough time until the animals would come close. And here you see the porcupine herd surrounding me. And for me, it was really important to get the deep inside look into the animals and their migration. Again and again, I get asked, why the caribou? Why do you care so much about these animals specifically? And I have to say that I fell in love with the caribou because they also represent wilderness in a different way. Wilderness that is alive, just like it used to be always. I often think about the bison, for example, that used to roam the plains. The bison used to be spreading around the prairies in the millions. And then what happened? They were wiped out, where you only have now several thousand animals left. But there in the Arctic, you still have hundreds of thousands of caribou. It's a true gift. I call it like a window back into time, into history. And we need to cherish that and keep it as something really, really precious. Caribou herds are in decline all across the Arctic. Some herds declined by 80, 90%. And so I was so excited to come to the refuge and also show my kids and my wife this. You can imagine, I've been gone for so many times and months at a time. Sometimes the longest would be 5, 6 months away from the family. And then I would come only home for 10 days, that they actually got to come. For me, it was important that the boys would understand too where their dad had gone so often, and also install in them a fascination of this natural world. After all, they're the future stewards of nature. And at the same time, for me, they are that future generation for whom we are also trying to protect this wilderness. So as we were there, something really unique happened. The caribou, the porcupine herd, started to head in our direction. And it wasn't just a few. Everything that you see there in the background that looks kind of like rocks, a little bit yellowish, this is all caribou. 100,000 caribou, something in that neighborhood, came together. It was one of those years when a huge amount of the herd comes together in the time in the summer when they also do normally the census. And we're friends with some of the biologists that do it, and they told us in that year, the caribou all came together. And not only did they come together, they were heading in our direction. Here you see Sylvan, our youngest, he's kind of giving us this look and asking, is it okay? Can we sneak a little bit closer? And here he goes with his brother Nanook. And they quietly are walking towards the caribou. And in the background, you see them, and you know, caribou are actually very curious animals, like I described before. And they're just standing there. And they're trying to be mindful, quiet. Then they get down on their bellies, just like Dad does when he takes the pictures. And the caribou come even closer. Just the curiosity brings them. The trick is to stay quiet. Oops.
Hat's geklappt, oder wie?
Yeah, to see the joy in their eyes, their excitement as they were coming back and telling us of their stories, that is something that will live in my memory forever, and I also hope in theirs. I know that they are all the time asking, when can we go back to the refuge? They actually feel extremely happy in the wild. They don't need any of these fancy things that you get in civilization. And yeah, we actually are purposely not allowing them to have any screen time or iPads or anything. Remember, the sun doesn't set in the Arctic, and here is Sylvan, 3:30 a.m. No, we're not those terrible parents that don't let the kids sleep at all. We actually turn day and night around. That means we sleep during the daytime when it's totally bright out. And believe it or not, they actually adjusted to that with us to get onto this different schedule. Because for me, I need that low light. I do actually need to have the chance to work with that warm light, the Arctic midnight sun, because that delivers the most beautiful imagery. And so, yeah, that's what we did going out there together, spending every Arctic night out in the tundra. And it really is something that they still remember so fondly. And we had a chance this year to return to the refuge for the search of the caribou, to see what's going on. And they're always with us in their greatest excitement. Now, I really hope that even if people don't have the chance to go there, that they understand that even in just our imagination, we have to have the chance to still think of wild places, to have a place that is still wild and free, even if you might only see it, you know, through an image. For me, that's what got me so excited when I was a little boy. I just knew somewhere in North America, there are still wild places left. And that imagination alone got me so intrigued. You know, just reading the books, seeing a few photographs is what got me excited about the wild. And that's what we're really trying to do with this film and with these images. It wasn't easy to let them go. But I was so blessed, and I felt so happy that they had a chance to understand where I was, where I had been all this time, and why we were doing this. They completely fell in love with the refuge, and they were so excited about it. And so for me, I was spurred on even more. With ever more increasing pressure from the new administration and the calls to develop the Arctic Refuge, for me, I have to say, I went up and down emotionally about it, because it's just so demanding, so challenging. And it was actually my kids that gave me a little bit of a break. For one, because of their excitement, not only excitement in the refuge, but excitement for every little bit of nature around us. We go here in Anchorage, in the city, for a walk in the park, and they discover a little bird's nest, or even here in our backyard, they discover an earthworm, and they're so full of joy. But they even understand, when you ask them why they love the refuge so much, they'll tell you it's like, because there's no cars, there's no power lines that actually can run everywhere, that everything is a place for them to be close to nature. And so for a child to already understand that, yeah, that gives me chills. And at the same time, it motivates me that we all try even harder to keep these places. So I headed out in all the seasons, like Tom mentioned. Here I'm rafting down the Canning River with my brother. And if I think about the refuge, and you know, thinking about it, especially after having seen it in so many different phases, in so many different seasons, now when I recall those words about that flat white nothingness, you know, when I started this project, I realized that it's nothing like it at all. I realized that there's so many faces to the refuge. It's so full of life, so exciting really, that we can't allow politicians to just reduce it to, you know, a few words like that. And for me, I hope that these images allow you to understand, and also allow public that might not necessarily have the chance to ever see it, why it's so precious, why we need to keep some places like they used to be for always. And I hope that these images that I was able to share with you, gave you this insight, got you excited to fight with the Alaska Wilderness League, with the great coalition of conservation organizations, of all of us together, that we can all fight together to keep this place protected, because it is truly that last great wilderness. And so with that, yeah, I want to thank you. It's been wonderful. I know we will have a round of Q&A, and we'll also hear from Bernadette. So thank you very much. I'm excited that I'm part of this team to keep fighting for the Arctic Refuge. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Florian. To echo what I have seen go throughout the chat for the last 35, 40 minutes is just what an amazing, stunning opportunity you just gave us all to really take us to the place you obviously care so deeply about. We also saw a number of questions that people are wondering how they can help. And so with that segue, I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Adam Colton, who is going to share some ways that you can get involved in this campaign, and then we will begin our panel.
Thanks, Monica, and thanks so much, Florian. I have chills, really. It's always moving in the way you tell the stories. Just brings us all in. Thank you, Tom. This has really been a special presentation. The Brooks Mountain Range behind me in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. Unfortunately, this is not one of Florian's photos. This is one I took, so it doesn't have quite the same quality, but it was a memorable trip. But long before I became the executive director of the Alaska Wilderness League, I was a member and supporter. And long before I had a chance to experience the refuge firsthand, I knew that these were incredible places that had to be fought for. And I wanted to encourage, many of you have put questions in the chat, how you can help, how you can get engaged. I want to encourage you to think about that question for a moment. You know, is this something that you personally care so passionately about as we do, that you're willing to join the fight, to think of yourself? You saw where Florian put up those images of Prudhoe Bay. What stands between the industrial complex of Prudhoe Bay and the Arctic Refuge is the Canning River. You saw his raft on the Canning River. Are we willing to collectively stand together at that Canning River and in defense of this incredible landscape and make sure that oil drilling never, ever happens? In a few moments, you're going to be hearing from my colleague and great friend, Bernadette Dementa, who's the executive director of the Gwich'in Steering Committee. And you'll hear her perspective about why this landscape is not only a great wild place, but about why it's sacred and why the birthing grounds of the Porcupine caribou herd are not just a spectacular wildlife occurrence, but one that is fundamental to the Gwich'in Athabascan people. So I'm asking you to consider joining us, becoming part of the fight to save the Arctic Refuge, become a member of the Alaska Wilderness League. You know, by joining the Alaska Wilderness League, you are becoming part of a special family of committed people that are so committed that you're going to join the one national organization that works full-time, 24/7, for the conservation of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and other special places in Alaska. But I'm also asking you to consider supporting the Gwich'in Steering Committee. Again, you're going to hear from Bernadette. But so this isn't just an environmental fight, but it's a human rights fight. It's a fight for the Gwich'in way of life. And so we're proud to stand with the Gwich'in people. And so here's a slide about how you can connect with the Gwich'in Steering Committee and support them. So again, you can go to alaskawild.org tonight, right now, and become a member of Alaska Wilderness League. There's our website. You can click on ways to give. You can also click on ways to get involved, because this is also an opportunity to get connected to all who care about these places, and make sure that you're letting members of Congress know that you're supporting our fight in the courts, that you're putting pressure on the oil companies directly, companies like Chevron that wanna that have been arguing that they want access to this sacred land. So again, together we can fight to protect the Arctic Refuge. I'm 100% confident that with your help, we can do this. Many of you have already joined. Many of you are already incredible supporters. For that, thank you. Thank you for doing that. But I do hope that you'll consider that extra effort tonight to support the cause and get engaged. Thanks so much. And with that, I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Adam. And yes, I thank everyone who is currently a member, and thank everyone who is going to be joining us through their support and through their contributions in our ongoing efforts. And with that, I'm very excited to begin the panel discussion portion where you get to learn a little bit more about not only the upcoming project as well as the work that we are doing, but also the people that are working so hard to protect it. So with that, I know you've already heard from Florian and now you've heard from Adam, and our other two panelists are Helen Trullo and Bernadette Dementif. Helen is the executive director of Braided River, which is a Seattle-based nonprofit that focuses on providing philanthropic support to environmental causes through publishing books, arranging exhibitions and media, as well as supporting photographers, fieldwork, and forming partnerships with nonprofit organizations. And Helen has long been part of the Arctic Refuge and bringing these images and sounds and sights to so many of us in the lower 48 to inspire the passion that is so greatly needed. And then, of course, Bernadette Dementif, as Adam mentioned, the executive director of the Gwich'in Steering Committee in Fairbanks. And so I would first like to turn it over to her to share a few words about the work that she is doing. Hi, Bernadette.
Good afternoon. Jin Gwinzi Shwaji Bernadette Dementif Auji, Kujaja Kwatsan Ikli. I just said good afternoon, my relatives. My name is Bernadette Dementif and I'm from Fort Yukon. You know, a lot of people, they look at the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge as an environmental issue and as a, you know, for polar bears and yeah, it is all of that. But it's also about the human rights of the Gwich'in and the many indigenous people who live up here. You know, we're not activists. We're not environmentalists. We are mothers and fathers who care about the future of our children. And the Gwich'in and the Caribou have a spiritual and cultural connection since time immemorial. They, if you look at the migratory route and the Gwich'in communities, they're pretty identical. Our creation story tells us that there was a time that we were able to communicate with them and we made a pact to take care of each other. And you know, I don't know how to defend 40,000 years in 5 minutes when I go to DC. How do I defend, you know, 40,000 years of history? So for the Gwich'in gathered for the first time in 1988, and that was the first gathering held in over 150 years. And Sitsu Sarah, Sitsu mean grandma, Sitsu Sarah Abel, she's the one who called on the gathering because we had all these people flying in saying we're gonna be rich and we're gonna, but you know, we're rich in our culture. We're rich in our way of life. Our ways of life may be harder to live, but it's the way we choose to live. We're not asking for anything. We're not asking for jobs. We're not asking for schools, offices. We're simply asking to continue to live and thrive off the land that Creator blessed us with. A land that we have been taken care of for over 40,000 years. In 1988, the gathering, our elders, they directed us to go out and tell the world that we are here, to do it in a good way and don't compromise our position. Now that do it in a good way, that's a very simple sentence, but that's not always easy, especially when you're up against a very dysfunctional administration, one that shares misleading statements and just straight up not truthful. We don't only speak for the Gwich'in, we speak for the caribou, we speak for the birds, for the animals, because they can't tell us if they're hurting. They can't tell us if they're hungry or if they're sick. And we know there's impacts happening to them because, you know, some of the feedback we're getting is that in the Prudhoe Bay area, the herds that are in those areas have all declined. The Western herd declined over 50% since 2010. So you can't tell me that our food security is not going to be impacted, not when we see different. There's black bone marrow they're witnessing. And, you know, there's, although the Gwich'in lead this fight, it's not just about us. There's many indigenous people that live in Alaska. There's over 227 federally recognized tribes who are not being involved in this decision. We are caribou people. A piece of the caribou heart lies within us, and a piece of the Gwich'in heart lies within the caribou. And we've always had experience, like, when I started crying when I saw the video, because those are a part of me. I know some people that live far away, they do not understand, but we are connected to them. This is real. And this land that they want to open, that is so sacred that we do not step foot there. That is where they give birth. Even times during starvation and food shortage, our people still never went there. That is how sacred it is to us. And they want to come in and put oil rigs in there. We matter. We're real people. We're mothers, fathers, grandparents. And we matter. Our ways of life matter. We still, like 80% of the food in my freezer is traditional food. This year has been really hard on the Alaskan people. People that usually get 100 to 180 fish got 4. They have to feed their family with 4 fish throughout the winter. And then now the hunting season also was not good. Many families did not get caribou or moose. We're seeing changes in the way they migrate. And, you know, my elders, they are my scientists. They know the history. Our history is oral. And it's been passed on from generation to generation that this place is off limits. And we need to like listen to that, really listen. And then you have to understand, like, you know, I go to New York and it's so full of concrete. I mean, you have to have nature. You have to have a connection. And, you know, that they choose to live that way. I respect that. That's all I'm asking for. That's all we are asking for, is the respect to live the way we've always have, to live and thrive off the animals that we've survived off for thousands of years. You know, when they did this process, they left out our Gwich'in communities, many Gwich'in communities, and a chief and another executive director had to fly to Fort Yukon to testify. They told us 1 week prior that they were coming, and it was on a day we told them, this is not a good day. We're honoring our traditional chief this day, which has been planned for 4 months. And their response was, well, we're coming anyway. And they gave my community 2 hours. Now, this wasn't a consultation. This wasn't a government to government. This was just them telling us what they're going to do. They're not following any, of the laws that was set in place. And what is a refuge? The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The Alaska elected leadership that we have up here no longer represents the people, but they represent the oil and gas companies. So we're being fed to fight for ourselves. We are up against, a lot of money, a lot of people that can say whatever they want because they have the platform, but we have the truth. And the decisions that they make is going to impact us and our children's future. And we're not just going to allow them to come bulldoze their way into our homelands and do whatever they want, because they're going to have a fight ahead of them. We come from strong people, and we don't give up that easy. I just want to share quickly that Alaska has 33 coastal communities literally eroding, falling into the ocean. We have dead fish in our lakes and our rivers. Like literally, they were just everywhere. And then you walk down the street and you see dead birds on the ground. These are our animals. You have to speak up for them. That's just, that's why I do what I do. I don't do it just for myself. I don't do it for my children or just my people. But I do it for the animals because they can't tell us. And you have to ask yourself, what side of history do you want to be on? One that helped destroy our Earth, our planet, or one that helped save it? Because climate change, don't care what color you are. Climate change don't care if you're rich or poor, black or white, native. We're all going to be negatively impacted. And it's about time we start sticking our differences aside and stand together. We can't stop it, but we could start preparing for it. And, I just want to thank you, Florian. I thank all of you guys for just continuing to stand with us. We've been having a really hard time. It's always been an uphill battle. I remember in 1995, one of my friends told me, you guys are gonna lose the fight, right? You guys are gonna, and I said, you guys been saying that for the last 30 years, so we're still fighting. We're not giving up. Giving up is not an option. So just please continue to stand with us, share our story, and Ana Masik on behalf of the Gwich'in Nation.
Thank you so much, Bernadette, for just your amazing, powerful words and how much you're willing and able to share with all of us. I know every how many people are just so inspired by everything you have to say, and we do appreciate it. We are with you, and we are gladly fighting alongside of you, and will not stop at all. And so now, as we start our panel, and thank you all for the questions. If you do have others, please continue to put them in the chat. We will try and get to them as we go through. But first, I'd like to turn it over to Helen. If you wanted to say a little bit about yourself, as I was able to just do a brief intro, and there were a number of questions after the trailer aired about where and when this project, people will be able to see it. So I thought we would start there.
Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you, Bernadette. You talk about your people being strong, but your words always bring tears to my eyes, because I don't know anyone that's stronger, more committed than you are. And your leadership and your knowledge is just makes my heart feel very, very strong. Thank you. I continue to learn from you. With this work that we're doing, we want to stand with you. We want to keep the drills out of this refuge. As Monica said, I'm a book publisher. I'm an artist. My role in all of this is that we publish photographically driven books with a select number of photographers like Florian Schulz, who have created these extraordinary bodies of work about places that they love and places that are threatened. And they want their work to make a difference. And we partner with strategic organizations like the Alaska Wilderness League. I'm a member, I'm a donor. I support everything that they do and the approach that they're taking. Visionary donors like Tom and Sonia just want to make sure that our visual storytelling can go beyond the book to support public policy change. And in the past, as many of you know, we've used books as platforms for events and museum exhibits, like the many that we've done with the beloved Burke Museum in Seattle that just reopened. And I've been working with Florian Schulz since the early 2000s on numerous books and campaigns. And he's truly one of the greatest talents in conservation photography and videography in the world today. He has such tremendous passion around keeping development out of the refuge and the coastal plain. So I'm really honored to be working on this new project with Florian and Tom Campion and Bernadette and the staff and board of the Alaska Wilderness League. It's really kind of a next chapter, and I'm involved now with the impact campaign around 2 film documentaries on the Arctic Refuge that are due out this winter and early spring of next year. And the impact campaign is very much along the lines of what we've done with books, in that we know that when people see these images, especially on a giant IMAX screen that's 7 or 8 stories tall, that's in 3D, that they will be moved beyond emotion to want to know what they can do to protect this place. And we want to be there to give them the tools to let them know that every voice makes a difference and that there are things that they can do. So this film is a new way for us to use our visual storytelling tools to tell the story, to help support your work, to let people know why people are involved with this and protecting it, as well as encouraging more people to become involved. So I'd be glad in the panel to answer any questions that you may have about the film, but there will be an IMAX film. There will also be a television documentary, and it should be out in the December to February timeframe. And we'll, of course, let you know about all of that through the Alaska Wilderness League channels, and we'll be working hand in hand with AWL and Bernadette and others to make sure that this work has consequence.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Helen. And Florian, kind of speaking of the film, we did get a few questions at the beginning. I'm just going to kind of sum them up. I think you might have alluded to this, but if you could share about how long of a length of time did you film over in order to get the footage for this current film project? I know it was likely a few years.
So the footage that you see in the film was filmed in the course of 5 years. And for me, though, it's not just this film, like Helen said before, it's really the refuge itself. So I have actually been to the refuge since ever since I've been for the first time 20 years ago. I've kind of returned, and even after this project has been officially finished from the actual filming side, I've returned the last years, including this summer. But it's countless months in the field for sure. It needs the time. We wanted to do it, you know, we actually needed to let the animals come to you, or to me in this case, I guess. And you can't rush these moments. I think it's the same as if you go out hunting. When I visited Arctic Village, I talked with the hunters and so on. You can't force a hunt. You can't force a good photograph. And so I really wanted to let the opportunities present themselves. And so for me, it's become a little bit, it's a part of who I am now. And because in the Arctic Refuge, I've found a place that's very ancient, and I can follow Helen's word there. I get chills when I hear Bernadette talk about it, what it means for the Gwich'in people. I think we all need to keep on remembering where we all come from, and that there is a very real connection with nature, and we can elevate us in this artificial world. We can pretend we can survive without that closeness to nature, but it won't last very long. So I think it's very important to think back to the roots. But anyway, that's, I guess, another question. But it was multiple years in the field to actually see all of this and to be able to capture it.
Wonderful. And you actually answered another one. You did mention that you were able to get up to the refuge this year, despite kind of everything that we have going on, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we had hoped to actually return to Arctic Village, but because of the pandemic, it wasn't possible. I would have never wanted something like that, just because of the potential threats that it could be to other people. And so, but yeah, we actually returned to the refuge this year, but just, being out in the wild on the northern coast.
And then speaking of how we have all been impacted, and even just meeting and being able to do this event tonight is a result of what we have been experiencing as a pandemic. But Bernadette, I was hoping you could share, because I thought that the virtual gathering which you held, and you alluded to the first Gwich'in gathering that you did last week, was just so spectacular in a sense of kind of overcoming what we're facing. And I wanted people to have an opportunity to hear a little bit about that from you.
Sure. I should have sent you the poster so you could have shared it. It was called Together Apart, how the Gwich'in continue to protect their homelands while battling the global pandemic. And, when the gathering was canceled, it was a hard decision, but we had to. Our elders are our very first priority. Our children, and we couldn't afford to, for it to pass around. So it was a little disappointing. I mean, a lot disappointing, but I also knew that as I went on, I also, I went through some personal issues. I lost my son. So I felt that, when we come together during our gatherings, it's just like a renewing our strength, coming together, sharing stories, and just, it's really like your heart, I don't know, you guys went to them, you understand. They're just amazing. We talk about the hard stuff during the day, and then in the evenings we jig dance, we dance I mean, our elders can outdance us. I mean, I'm surprised. They stayed up till 6 in the morning. I was in bed by midnight. But, you know, I just kind of felt that we needed to hear from each other. Our people needed to hear from their leaders, and to show them that we are going to get through this, and that that we're still here. We're not giving up. It was really, it started off, well, first I forgot to mention that I'm on the land. I may be in Alaska, but I'm on the land of the Upper Tanana people. My homelands are further up north. So we just spoke about what the caribou meant to us, and you know, that we're not giving up, and how each of our communities are dealing with the pandemic. You know, everybody's helping each other. Our people have always been like that. And I heard you talking about hunting. When we hunt, we don't shoot the first, you know, animal we see. There's a way that we hunt, especially caribou, because when I'm going to call them bachelors, okay? The caribou, the male caribou that run along them, those are the ones that are usually shot. The ones that are with young and female, you don't shoot them. They are the ones who are teaching, guiding the younger calf the way, just like we teach our children. There's so much similarities with the Gwich'in and the caribou, just like how they have leaders. They're called leaders. They're you don't ever shoot them. And we've had some, I guess, trophy hunters coming in doing that, and it affects the migratory route. But our people used to do that. Like our elders would tell us, you know, they might be here, so we would send a group of Gwich'in to go check and come back. So like we have a lot of similarities. And you know, I really do care about this issue. The first time I worked for Gwich'in steering committees off and on, 2005, 2006, 2011, and then 2014. But only when I went to Deschanel, it's a mountain my ancestors migrated through. When I went up there, like I could just close my eyes and I could just picture it, and the beauty of it. It just, I understood why my ancestors returned every year, you know, and that's where I asked Creator for forgiveness for being disconnected for so long. But I'm here now to share in my responsibility as a Gwich'in, and I take that very serious. Yeah, the land doesn't belong to anybody. We are caretakers, and you know, it's a little bit insulting when people say, "Well, we're closer, we're the second closest, we're the third closest," when everybody knows that our people all migrated. If you look at my, I have a poster, and it was before contact. And that whole area up there was untouched. And all the people were further down and stuff. And that was before first contact. Those were for the animals. And it just frustrates me that we have so many animals that are dying off. And, you know, is my grandchild going to be, is he going to be able to see a polar bear when he's older? Is he going to be able, you know, is our future generations going to know what wilderness really is? We have to protect what we have left. And we got to do it together. If anything good is going to come from this administration, it's going to be unity. It's going to be unity amongst the, not just the indigenous people, but of all people.
Thank you. Yes. And I know you did mention this a little bit. We have seen a lot of questions come up about climate change and what folks have been seeing. So I'll give you 1 minute to catch your breath, Bernadette. I'll toss it to Florian first in case over his time, folks are just wondering if you had seen anything, and then if you have anything to add, and then yeah.
Sure. Climate change obviously is something that doesn't just hit one part of this planet, but people often talk specifically about the Arctic as one of the places hit the most. Bernadette already touched on different communities, coastal communities, anyway, that are immediately actually so much impacted that they actually need to resettle and change their villages. In the Arctic Refuge itself, you can see the change of vegetation, but you also see that entire areas where permafrost is just basically falling apart. It's melting like the icing on a cake, and you can just see it collapse. And of course, we do see that the coastline, the shoreline is actually eroding much, much faster. When I came to the Arctic there first, even in my relatively short time there, right, over 2 decades, I remember at the beginning that there was years when the sea ice would last way longer and come back earlier. Now, both extremes are happening, that it disappears sooner and it doesn't return, you know, in a normal time. And so that means that the polar bears are actually forced onto the land for a longer period of time. And all of that is, yeah, is really difficult. But I think, you know, these changes we started seeing much earlier in the Arctic, but now those changes are evident everywhere. The hurricanes, the wildfires, we don't really need to look that far. We don't even need to look to the Arctic alone. It's really, I think, Mother Nature kind of telling us, hey, we borrowed so much time, we borrowed so much, basically, or we let so much abuse happen for such a long period of time, and nature has always allowed for another buffer until finally it's enough. And so for me, that's why I think it's even more important to fight for the Arctic Refuge, to stand with the Gwich'in, to all pull on the same string, because we know that oil is the wrong source for energy. We can't keep burning fossil fuels the same way. So I think anyway, it is very evident, but I think it's becoming evident everywhere, all around, through the storms, through the floods, through the fires, through so many different things. Of course, for the caribou, it means that when they are migrating as a species, that's on the longest migration of any land animal, they have to struggle, for example, when in the springtime, you have a cold period, and suddenly out of nowhere, during their migration, there is a breakup in the ice. And when the temperatures quickly climb, all that water rushes down the rivers with the pieces of ice. And what that means actually, that for the caribou to cross a river sometimes becomes impossible. So they might not even be able to follow their migration routes, or what it can mean also is that they actually, lose more caribou. Or if the caribou calves are already born, it means that those calves don't easily make it across the river. So that is directly impacting the caribou.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if there's other, specific questions, just jump in there. But Bernadette, because you were talking about the Gwich'in gathering, I was so fortunate to be at one of the Gwich'in gatherings with my family. And I just wanted to show you this, what Nanook drew. Nanook did this basically inspired from that Gwich'in gathering. And it was just such wonderful time because, you know, it shows how we're all the same across all cultures when it comes to the children. And it was Nanook and Sylvan. Well, actually, Sylvan was just the little toddler. He was sitting in the bushes picking the blueberries and just stuffing them in its mouth. But Nanook ran with the other boys and girls from Arctic Village, and they were playing, you know, in their imagination. They were running through the bushes and playing hunting. And so until midnight, you know how it is. Everybody's up all time. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. For us, we're very thankful to be part of that community, to be invited in, especially through Sarah, who has always been really wonderful and gave a lot of insights. And there's another beautiful video, which is called Arctic Voices, that we can provide a link to, where you hear different elders speak about the caribou, speak about the Gwich'in beliefs. And we were able to do a number of interviews. On my presentation right now, I didn't touch on that so much, but we've worked together with the Gwich'in. We've created, you know, different other shorter videos, because we need to look at this topic from all angles. And I felt, or I'm so thankful that you could give your perspective directly, Bernadette, because you are rooted. It is your home. It makes me cry also, because I feel that connection to wilderness that we're losing everywhere. But it's so meaningful to be fighting for one's home. And so anyway, we're very excited to all be joining you in that fight as well.
Thank you. Some of the feedback, I really like that picture. Can you take a picture of it and send it to me? I'll put it up on our,
We will.
I'll put it up on our social media.
Okay.
So, you know, some of the feedback that we've been getting is like, this lady told me that she was sitting out in her house and she said she felt like an earthquake just happened, and she looked out her window and 15 feet fell off of their island. And one of my friends who's Gwich'in, and her husband's a Nupiaq, she's Gwich'in. They used to live in Fort Yukon, now they live up in Barrow. And she told me to come visit, and I'm not like, nope. But she says also that there's a lot of erosion happening up there. And, you know, that there's polar bears that are staying on land, and their children, they even have bear patrol, like polar bear patrol. And like I said, the dead fish, and also the fish that we got last year, I have pictures in case anybody wants any of them. They had like these burn marks on them, like they were like acidy, or it looked like it was weird. And then one of the fish had a big round white thing in its neck. I don't know, I've never seen anything like it. And then, oh my God, we have ticks. Do you guys know what ticks are? I never knew what
Yes,
ticks were.
unfortunately, yes.
I never knew what ticks were till like a year and a half, 2 years ago. Those are nasty little, they sucked, oh my God. We have those. You know, there's a rabbit that was in Fort Yukon, and one of the health directors, you know, she is like, does anybody know what this is? And I was like, those look like tumors. It was all around its face, and they were actually ticks. And now we are starting to find them on our moose. You know, and I just want to share that, you know, when we say that we have to move a community, you have to remember that's their homelands. That's where they've lived. And that's where they buried their loved ones. And they're going to have to move away from that all that's going to be falling into the ocean. And you have that's got to be a very, very hard, you know, to accept. People don't understand that you just pick up and move. You can't dig up the graves and take them with you. You know, you gotta leave them, and it's very, very emotional. It's very hurtful. Our rivers are changing. When I went home for the Arctic Indigenous Climate Summit, the report is actually this close to being done. You know, when I went home, I was like, where did that come from? There's an island right in the middle of the Yukon River. Like, they were like, I don't know, it just popped up a few years ago. I was all like, what? Like, I never seen that there. So now there's like, you know, it's changing to the fact that one of our most well-respected hunters knew the Yukon like the back of his hand. Him and his wife drowned, and they still haven't found him. And this was 2 years ago. I can't read my own handwriting. So, and just so you know, after the 2017 election, you know, we were going down to ask for a monument, and I thought I was going to come back to my people and say, we got another form of protection, but the election didn't go our way. Like, that was so insane. I couldn't even fathom that. But I had to come back and tell them to get ready. We got to fight. But I didn't know that it was going to be like this. This is a very, very dishonest administration, and it's like I said, that do it in a good way, simple sentence, but I still follow the direction of my elders, and I'll continue to do that. And you know what? We will stand up against anybody who seeks to destroy the Arctic Refuge, who seeks to destroy the calving grounds.
Thank you. And we will be standing alongside you the entire way. And with that, I did want to, I think you teed it up perfectly, Bernadette, just to send it over to Adam to share a little bit about all the ways in which we are fighting back and pushing back against these current attempts and succeeding.
Thanks, Monica. Thanks so much, Florian. Thanks, Helen. And most of all, thank you so much, Bernadette. This has really been a special evening. And I know that already more than 1,000 folks have tuned in, whether on Facebook Live or through our various links and channels. And and we know that there are so many of you and others who care passionately about the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. We get this question of what can I do? And I try to share it before. I want to be really crystal clear about this. First, you can go to alaskawild.org, and if you're not already a member, you can join Alaska Wilderness League. It's the best way to stay engaged every step of the way. We'll keep you plugged in. We'll let you know when there are votes in Congress. We'll let you know when there are opportunities to engage and put pressure on companies to keep them out of the Arctic Refuge. We'll let you know what mischief the Trump administration is up to. We'll let you know when the IMAX films are coming out. But please do go to Alaska Wild and join. Also, go to the Gwich'in Steering Committee website that we put up earlier and support the Gwich'in and their efforts. They're doing a wonderful job leading our collective efforts. And Bernadette, there's no leader like her, and we're thrilled to be following along and working alongside of them. Finally, just think about getting out and voting. You know, this is a critical time. We know we need support from all sides of the aisle, but it's critical that you put pressure on candidates, you ask candidates, you look up candidates' positions, where do they stand on protecting the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge? How have they voted? If you want more information about that, feel free to get in touch with us. We can share how folks have voted, how they've how they've been. But again, this has been a wonderful evening. Huge gratitude to each and every one of you for being part of this special family of committed conservationists and advocates who are willing to fight at each step and stage to protect the wildest place left in America. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And with that, I will just echo his thanks for everyone who was able to join us for this incredibly special evening. I am so thrilled. Florian, thank you again for joining us tonight, taking the time out, and of course, sharing your images and your stories that really just touched home with me. And based on the chat feedback, everyone else in attendance tonight. Bernadette, again, thank you. I know how incredibly busy you are. Sharing your words and your wisdom with all of us is so special. And Helen, thank you for not only making this project happen, but working with us every step of the way and providing us with resources that really just make our work so much easier. And on that, I would just like to say thank you again for everyone who joined us this evening. We're thrilled that so many people tuned in, joined the league, and we hope to see you at the next Geography of Hope. Good evening.